looking at other ones as well. So Malaysia are two places we've been speaking to and looking at deploying in. And the Flanders, Belgium is another area that's reached out to us and looking to procure sensors.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chrisella.
Sorry about that. My internet is being buggy here.
That's okay.
So,
we'll keep talking if you get disconnected.
Okay. Did you guys both get a chance to introduce yourselves?
We did, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I wanted to hear a little bit about what the inspiration was behind your companies. So, Priyanka, I've heard your story before. So this time, why don't we start with Babak and your company's story?
Were you deferring to me? I'm sorry. I think you broke up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just telling Priyanka this. I was looking to develop
sorry.
As some people in Salt Lake City might know, we have kind of an acute inversion and pollution problem. I grew up not having asthma and later developing it later in my life. And my grandfather has emphysema, and unfortunately, he needs eye care due to a botched cataract surgery. The Moran Eye Center is a world-renowned institution, and unfortunately, my grandfather was not able to come visit and get the proper care he needed during the winter months because of the air quality. And so I was thinking of how can trying to find a solution for my gramps, and I want to develop a scarf that allows you to breathe through it as like a filter that you could wash. And I think through my Google search queries, I kind of showed up. I don't know, the cookies in my browser allowed Facebook to target me for an ad, which was the company that I work for now. Actually, it was the Indiegogo campaign for that company. And then I reached out to the CEO saying, hey, I love your device, but I work in Salt Lake and I live in Salt Lake City, and I think it'd be a great way for the public to know exactly what's going on to the air around them, and also for policymakers to find out the efficacy of the types of legislation they want to put in to mitigate air pollution. And so it's kind of crazy how things happen. People say that all the time. It really happened this time.
That's really cool.
So it was
Priyanka, how about you?
So for me, clean energy and sort of environmental issues was something I was always passionate about from a young age, in terms of both, recycling, and then I was always fascinated in energy and creating new energy sources. And my first job out of college was working in energy research. And at that time, oil prices had started to go up significantly. And people were starting to look at alternative energy as a viable solution to, drilling oil out of the ground. And it got me looking at various technologies. And when I was at MIT, I started looking at, different technology solutions that were out there existing. And it was then that I realized, how big the issue of plastic waste was. 5 trillion pieces of plastic waste are in the oceans, trillion pounds in U.S. landfills, and, the amount of plastic we use globally each year is growing by 10%. We're only recycling about 10%. So it's really a huge issue with no solution, and no one was really, coming up with ways to really address the issue. More and more things just keep getting produced out of plastic. And this technology, the plastic to fuels, it had been attempted before, but no one had really brought it to commercialization. And I thought, it made a lot of sense to take whatever can't be easily recycled. The challenge with plastic is to recycle it, you need a pure stream of a specific type of plastic. And sometimes it's very hard to separate out the different plastics from each other once they're mixed in a recycling bin. And the great thing about our process is those different types can be mixed together, because we're just taking the plastic at a molecular level, we're converting it back into fuel. So plastic's composed of long carbon chains, and diesel is C12 to C20. So what we're doing is we're breaking up those chains and, taking it back to molecular level. So we're able to accept like a wide variety of feedstock, and we don't face the challenges that recyclers do. So that's what sort of inspired me when I was at MIT, and just sort of put together a team to work on figuring out how do we commercialize this and make this scalable and something that you can do at a large scale. It's very easy to do it at a lab scale, and it's much more challenging to do it at a large scale. So that's what we've been working on for the last few years. So we founded the company in 2011, and we've been sort of iterating with larger and larger prototypes over the years. And now we have our first commercial demonstration facility here in Salt Lake City. And beyond this, we're now looking at other locations around the country, around the world, to sort of take the technology and, try to really address it at a larger scale and solve that, problem of plastics all around the world that we keep hearing about is becoming a larger issue.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds really revolutionary. I mean, it sounds like Back to the Future. Back to the Future too, right? Where Doc puts the trash in. Yeah. Not to reduce it to that, but it really is that innovative. That's amazing.
It really is. Yeah. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
It's very cool. So both of you, I think, are working on campaigns with public institutions right now. Priyanka, I believe I heard that you're working with Salt Lake City on including a special bag with the recycling the weekly recycling pickup that'll come straight to you. And then Babak, you're working on a test with the University of Utah to test air quality in Salt Lake City. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you guys are doing in both of those tests.
Sure. Do you want me to go ahead and start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Salt Lake City has been, really supportive of our technology. We've gotten financing from the city's economic development loan fund. They're very supportive of, green innovation. And I think we're very fortunate to be here in Salt Lake City, where there is, people don't think of Utah as being the hub of, being green, but I think, at a local level,
we were #1 in creating green jobs this last quarter. So
is that right? Wow.
Yeah, we were. It's pretty cool.
I'm glad we're both doing our little bit. Yeah, we've definitely received a lot of support. Something that we are trying to work on right now is introducing, as you mentioned, this purple energy bag. And this is something that Dow Chemical sponsored a pilot in California last year. And basically they told residents that, put all your plastics that don't usually get recycled. So things like any type of films, bags, like potato chip wrappers, candy wrappers, all of that stuff that some people put it in their recycling bin and think it gets recycled. It doesn't actually get recycled, or they just put it in their can. And all of that's made out of plastic. Sometimes it even looks like it's made out of foil, but it's all basically plastic. All of that stuff ends up getting landfilled. And so we're trying to introduce this bag where people put those non-recyclable plastics in the bag, and then they put that purple bag in their regular blue recycling bin. So it's not a separate bin, but by getting the end consumer sort of engaged and understanding that these aren't recyclable materials, you're really able to keep large volumes out of landfill. And Dow sponsored that pilot in California last year. It was very successful, and the purple bags were sent to a plastic to oil recovery facility to convert them back into fuel. And what we're trying to do in Salt Lake City is do the same thing to get the community engagement, get people, aware of the plastic issue, and, demonstrate that we can do this at a local level and convert those plastics into something usable rather than landfill them. And the hope is to eventually have this, available in different cities around the country, around the world.
That's fantastic. It's really exciting. Can't wait to see it implemented.
Yeah, definitely.
When do you think that program will start? Sorry, Babak.
Yeah, we were hoping it would happen sooner. Unfortunately, it's been a lot of political changes in Salt Lake City recently, so
yeah.
Still working through that logistically. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Okay, sorry, Babak, I interrupted you.
No. We're looking to do a co-location. So our device, our research grade device, it retails for $600, but it's as accurate as a machine that costs $9,000 to $40,000. And we're having to do, I guess, more of these tests to get reassurance. So if I were to show you a device that I said, hey, I have something that's better than the iPhone in your pocket and it only costs $20, you'd be like, get out of here, But if I showed it to you and you'd want to see how well it worked, you'd want to play with it for a while before really subscribing to something like that. So I understand why people want us to test our equipment against. We made the steps to go through multiple co-locations, where we're actually about to establish that in the next week. The newer version of the device is smaller, and it also allows you to connect other types of sensors to it in the back. So you can make we're developing an external module for CO2 and VOCs, particularly aimed at indoor air quality. So the idea is that you could reference the two different points, outdoor and indoor air. So to be honest with the University of Utah, working with the University of Utah has been, they're more eager, they're ahead of it, more ahead and more prepared than we are in some respects. In fact, they're very eager to set everything up. We can't make enough devices. We sell every device we've been making, and so for us to allocate that has been kind of interesting as a small startup. We also manufacture these all in Vancouver, and while it's not overseas, we can get them sooner. Our ability to actually have control over the process is enhanced. It's great, but it's not the same as having it built in your backyard. We'd love to have it manufactured in Salt Lake City, and hopefully it's at some point maybe you can get there. Regarding working with other institutions, we've had a lot of the SLC Green folks, as she mentioned, or at the city. I mean, I have to really applaud the Becker administration for really taking this type of stuff seriously. She mentioned there's a new mayor in town, so we'll probably have to wait and see until the dust settles who the new director will be and how we can proceed forward with some of those things. Ideally, we'd like to the idea is that there's a map that not only residents can go to see air pollution within if they are near a deployment, but also to get updates in real time on your phone. So the National Weather Service does these push updates to connected devices, whether there's floods or tornadoes, sometimes Amber Alerts. So we're working with them to actually get the type of notification when air quality is hazardous in your particular region. And this is great. I mean, this is good, helpful for people who are susceptible or vulnerable to this type of stuff: children, older folks, asthmatics. The public-private partnership, I think, it might be the future of enterprises. Salt Lake City is very eager to have more and more enterprises located, I think, within its municipality, and because Utah is killing the game right now, as some would say. But at the same time, if you look at the distribution of capital and the job growth, Provo and Ogden are actually, in some respects, ahead of Salt Lake City. So the city is really very is very motivated to kind of play catch up, because we are the capital city. And if you've been to Utah, we're kind of really the only place you want to be, right? We've got everything here. And so, not to hype the city, but they've been great to work with.
Okay, can you guys still hear me? My internet's been a little bit wonky here.
We can hear you, yeah.
Great, okay. So there's been a big push here at COP21, especially from health professionals, to end the use of fossil fuels as soon as possible. And then there's been a lot of calls for government subsidies of fossil fuels to end. And the IMF estimates that globally there are about $5.3 trillion going to fossil fuel subsidies a year. Do either of you see, what kind of impacts do you guys see that having on your businesses? Babak, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there's a micro and there's a macro level to it. It sounds bizarre, but I mean, yeah, my business, as air pollution increases, our business grows, right? There's a demand for it. The governments of Malaysia and Singapore have reached out and are looking to rushing to deploy a solution to like an early warning network for their citizens to know when those fires from Indonesia will reach their citizens in populated areas. At the same time, oil. So I have a very interesting perspective on oil in the sense that, the minute they make, an electric Subaru Outback that's, under $30,000, I think many people are going to purchase that car, myself included. But there's a lot of transportation. Unfortunately, the world, in my opinion, relies on oil, and there's like this pressure point, because we don't just need oil for transportation. There's ways of, and Priyanka would probably be much more qualified to talk about this, the byproducts of oil refinement are products that, I mean, I'm talking to you on my iPhone, and it was made using the polystyrene and all these other polyurethane products that come from oil as well. So, and people buy bottled water. I mean, we have the appliques on my car, my clothes, polyester. I mean, there's all these things that oil does. And so I think that in some respects, so if we reduce the use of oil and the cost of oil goes up, the cost of plastic goes up. So the cost of my product will go up, and the cost of everybody's products will go up. I think one of the issues is finding alternative solutions, or in Priyanka's case, closing that loop. And the fact that you can make products out of plastic, and then instead of, once you've used it, you can take it, make it back into fuel, and then there's cleaner fuel technology. And ideally, I would love for all vehicles to be electric. And I mean, but maybe that's a better answer for Elon Musk, right? Maybe that's what he's trying to solve. It's not what my company's trying to solve, unfortunately. We do see enormous benefits financially, rather, and also awareness. As fossil fuels continue to burn, people are more interested in we can learn more about how to improve and mitigate their usage, and that's where we come in. And so it's important for me not to politicize my product in that regard. I'd love to see an end to oil, but I drove today for a meeting, and unfortunately I felt really guilty. I had to drive 20 miles in Salt Lake City. We really lack transit-oriented development. And so this is just the developed world. I can't imagine what it's like in the undeveloped world.
Well, I flew all the way to France, so don't feel too bad about driving to and from.
Yeah.
You should have taken the ferry.
Yeah, I know. Take a little rowboat across the ocean.
Yeah, no,
Priyanka, how about you?
Yeah, no, I think in terms of those, trillions of dollars of subsidies that are going towards fossil fuels, it definitely does hurt alternative energy.
Priyanka, are you still with us?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll just keep going. Maybe Chrisella lost me. I think the issue with having those trillions of dollars of subsidies going towards fossil fuels is it does really hurt alternative energy development, because you're basically allowing more fossil fuels to be drilled and allowing there to be more supply on the market. Recently we've seen oil prices come down, and sort of the irony is that as oil becomes more inexpensive, it becomes harder for alternative energy to make its commercial. So by having these subsidies in the marketplace that are sort of helping traditional fossil fuels instead of new technologies, it actually ends up hurting alternative energy, because you're getting cheaper fuel, and that by having just like cheaper fuel out there's less of a case to be made for buying an electric vehicle, because now with gasoline prices so low, it's hard to make that case for having paying extra for an electric vehicle. Mm-hmm. So that's what happens when you heavily subsidize the fossil fuel industry, is you end up hurting a lot of alternative energy, because it would be better for the market to just sort of take see that there's sort of this balance between having the alternative energy and trying to wean off the fossil fuels. So I definitely think that it does hurt us, and I think the more that different countries can push to like stop subsidizing fossil fuels, it will definitely help alternative energy development in the long term.
Could I add to that just something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because I find myself. So oil is it seems as if oil and the players in that industry, there's really like dozens as opposed to thousands of, say, like other types, and it's very it's, you would know better than I would, but it's very high tech stuff, right? I mean, it's very technical rather. And as you can see, when the room for error is very little, and if you do mess up, there's catastrophic consequences. And so there is a lot of money in that regard. But I wanted to ask, I know I shouldn't be asking the questions, but oil as a means to project power, because this is something that I've been having to meet with many people in communities who have had many jobs created by energy in some respects, and they feel, and I've had activist groups want to use my technology to hold industry accountable, and whereas I'd like to do that in many respects, I'm concerned about the ability for these companies to either, to bully their way and push small companies like ours out of the way. And this is something, and I wanted to ask, I guess, your opinion on how you're able to connect with those folks and prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think like in terms of oil companies, we're not really on their radar just because we are, so small. But oil is very political, and it's, I think a lot of things related, whether it's subsidies or, controlling the oil price, it is an extremely, political thing. And it's, small companies like ours really don't have, a say in any of that. And we just sort of end up having to respond to, what's going on. So, I think it is challenging for smaller companies like us to really have a say when it is, as you mentioned, there's only, a few players there really who have the power to, have influence. So.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that, Chrisella. My apologies.
That's all right. I actually can't hear Priyanka at all right now, and I didn't want to interrupt her. Is she done with her answer?
How far away are you?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, I actually can't hear anybody now, so I'm going to ask this last question. It's a rather general question here. So just to wrap up, and then if there's anybody in the audience who has any questions, if you type /Q in the chat over to your right and then send in your question, we'll be able to see that and ask that of our panelists today. So my last general question is a bit of a two-parter. What's the biggest step that you think the average person can take today to lessen their environmental impact? And what do you hope to see come out of COP21?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What was the second question? Did you catch that?
I think I don't know what the second question was, but I think one was about how you could lessen your environmental impact.
Right, yeah.
I couldn't hear the second.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the second one either.
Yes, the first question was, what's the big step one big could in everyday life environment? And the second question is, what do you do this week?
Maybe do you want to go ahead with answering the first question?
Yeah, certainly. I was individually, to be honest with you, your environmental impact, try carpooling. I don't want to advocate veganism or vegetarianism, but the meat industry has an enormous impact on the environment, particularly industrialized beef. Something that's me not eating a hamburger, individually probably may not do a lot, but I think multiple people at least realizing what the impact of what we're doing does and kind of augmenting that behavior collectively can do those types of things. Also, I mean, there's really small steps. Plan your day out. That's something that I've learned for me is helpful. Not only I spend less money on gas, but I'm using less energy. And being just more mindful as a consumer. Find out where your products are or where they're made, or if you want to take that step. It is kind of a luxury that we have that opportunity to read things about where our products are manufactured. But just to be informed ultimately is the real thing, because as a whole, we're as enterprises, right? We are selling solutions and products, but as small companies, we aren't commodifying our solutions, right? In the same way, say, not to bash the North Face, I'm wearing a North Face fleece, and it was probably manufactured in Bangladesh, and it is made from petrochemicals. And it's, that's something that I received this as a gift, but obviously, like, you think about those things when you're purchasing those products, and our biggest way we can make a change, in our opinion, in my opinion, is with our dollar and how we spend money and the products and the businesses we choose to support. So if you live in the Salt Lake area, I highly recommend using Priyanka's PK Clean, because I mean, as a whole, let's be honest with you, recycling in Salt Lake City has always been difficult. It's been, and the fact that we've had any sort of solutions, the only solutions that have been brought to the table have only been from the private industry, like Momentum glass recycling, for example. So I'm excited to see more businesses like yours in our community, and to see a solution to something that is plaguing our planet.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on consumers voting with their wallets. And I think as consumers, we just sort of feel like we're at the mercy of just, corporations. But if people really took that time to think about, where does every product they buy, like, where does that come from? What is the footprint in terms of like carbon footprint of, their choices, I think people would really make different choices if they knew where things came from. You mentioned the meat industry, and you probably watched like Cowspiracy and documentaries like that, and it's shocking how much of a negative environmental impact. You think that, oh, I ride my bike, but in reality, like, just eating that Big Mac has like a worse footprint than driving your car. And consumers don't really understand that. And, nowadays you really have to educate yourself. You really have to read every label when you go to the store to see, like, there's always some marketing hype on it, but, like, to get a level deeper and see, where a thing's made, what's in them. With us, we're very focused on waste, and, challenge with waste is people just like literally will, put things in a trash can and never like think twice about, where does that go? And in reality, like, that's not where the life cycle ends. That's really sort of where it begins once you put it in the trash can. Either it's going to get, best case it'll get recycled. Worst case, it's going to end up in a landfill, or it's going to end up in the ocean at some point, or there's people don't think about what's happening to their waste. They just kind of use all those wrappers and things, and don't really think twice about where it's going. And, from that waste perspective, I think you make the choice when you buy a product to think about, what waste am I going to generate? So either you try to avoid using products that generate a lot of waste, or, find ways to reduce that consumption, or you try reusing products or recycling. But if people really took that extra step to think about, where things go, and I think that's been something really educational for me working in the waste industry is, I really understand now that, okay, this is what can be recycled, this can't be recycled, this is the footprint of different things. And I think consumers really need to be better educated, because most people just don't understand how recycling works, and, what can be recycled, what can't be recycled. And it really has to happen at an early age. And we need to sort of focus on this, because, once children are informed as, future consumers, they'll make the right decisions. And there needs to be that generational shift happening now, because obviously the, older generation has like failed at that. And now we have to, try to make a push, at least with the younger generation, to be more conscious of our choices, because each of us, it's not something that one person can fix. Climate change, it really requires like each person making efforts in their daily life to make a, collective impact. Chrisella, can you hear us, or?
I can hear you fine, but maybe we can't hear her.
Yeah.
What you mentioned about consumers is a great point, and I feel that one of the barriers to this is the costs associated with that. One of the commenters mentioned that farmers that produce the food we have to eat use oil and diesel powered equipment, and which is in many respects true. I mean, the tractor is over 100 years old, right? And a tractor, even though it's 100 years old, is still like 10 to like 50 grand. Some of them are hundreds of thousands of dollars. Farming, the way farming is practiced now is incredibly expensive, right? But as a whole, there are solutions to people to, I think, that drive consumers to find solutions that are more affordable for them. I mean, I might have been Yvon Chouinard, who's the guy who started Patagonia, and someone asked him about starting the organic, because he'd kind of revived the organic cotton industry, because in California, he said, I can't change the entire industry as a whole. We need someone like Walmart. And Walmart, if you read about it, Walmart has now started to get into the organic foods industry in the way, and food is still being produced industrially, right? But it's being produced at a higher quality, or rather without pesticides. And if you can get people, the people in the market, the movers and shakers, to get better buy-in, I think that you, whether it's a more affordable product or something that's really enticing, maybe it's something that helps them increase their margins. At the end of the day, as long as it benefits everybody, I'm okay with that, because unfortunately, we live in an era where, I mean, this is not conspiratorial. There is a bizarrely pronounced gap between people who have and those that have nothing, and that gap is only widening. And so, to have services and provide a solution, it has to be all-encompassing. It's not just that only wealthy people can drive Priuses, and it's not that only certain people can afford the Tesla right now. Maybe the Tesla is $70,000 right now, and maybe in 10 years it becomes, as affordable as Kia. And then you'll see more people buying in. I think we're seeing it. We're at the tip right now where things are starting to change, and the COP21 conference is pretty remarkable for being, I think, that impactful and having that many people involved to have that type of a global conversation. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe the conversation isn't being held in the way that some of the people at the conference would like it to be held, but one day,
there actually has
soon,
been some conversation about the inequality and the unequal impacts of climate change happening here, and the small island states in particular have been very vocal in trying to get larger nations like the United States and China.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds crazy disproportionate, right? These are the people who are seeing the forefronts of it, and we are the ones who, we as the more developed nations, are the ones who happen to be contributing the most to this type of pollution. So one of the problems with climate change is also that the immediate impacts are not seen, right? We probably won't see. Someone told me that if you, one climatologist I've been working with, he said if we stopped all emissions right now, you wouldn't really see an impact for the next 20 to 40 years. And so we're also, a society, a civilization where we have things immediate. I mean, I'm talking to you through my cell phone, and she's in Paris. And for us to think of doing things this proactively, it might be a little bit difficult. And I agree with you 100% that it probably has to be, starts with teaching children at an early age and it being part of an educational conversation. When I grew up, I was telling you, I guess earlier, I've lived here for 20 years, and I didn't know until I had this job what the air quality index readings meant. The red, yellow, and green in Salt Lake City, right? Every child in public school in Utah, every public or private school should know what those are and how air pollution is accrued, right? Because when we teach children, it becomes embedded, and then they're the ones who ultimately are able to make those changes. And it's a shame that we're seeing some crazy stuff happen right now. The world is an interesting place, and we need to find a solution rather quick, but really meaningful. Sorry to have such a verbose dialogue about that, but
no, those are really good points, and definitely the inequality issue. There is inequality just in our country itself, in the U.S., in terms of access to like things like electric vehicles, or if you want to eat organic, it's just out of reach for most people to live a life that is not only healthier but has a smaller environmental footprint. And at a global scale, that's even more pronounced. We always hear about island communities that literally just get littered by plastic waste rolling up on their beaches, and that plastic isn't waste that they generate. It's coming from other countries like ours, which are major consumers and producers of plastic, or through practices in like countries like China, which places like China end up with most of the world's plastic waste. And climate it's a very global thing where it's not a localized issue. Our emissions here or our waste generation, like it can lead to impacts all around the world. And inequality is definitely, very tied into this issue.
Hey, Chrisella, nice to see you again. Oh no,
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
We can hear you.
Okay, hooray, awesome. Well, have we covered all the topics? Is there any more that you guys want to talk about as far as your businesses go? Think of the COP21 conference or anything like that?
Are there a lot of children at the COP21 conference?
No, it's a UN conference, so they don't usually allow children in. You have to go through a pretty rigorous application process.
Oh, okay.
I was one of the last journalists to be allowed in at all.
Oh, really?
There are a couple of public sites around the city where they have exhibits set up around the climate stuff, and that's a little bit more public. And I'm not sure if children are being allowed in there, but I haven't actually attended any of those myself. I've been focusing on a couple of side events about climate and climate health.
So it's going to be
somebody just asked the question, what is the COP21 conference about? The COP21 conference is the big United Nations climate summit, where they are coming to, all the world's nations coming together to try to come to an agreement, a treaty of some sort on how to stop climate change or to limit the one planet to 2 degrees Celsius. There's actually some people who are pushing for 1.5 degrees Celsius. So it comes out, the world's ministers, Secretary Kerry just gave a speech today saying that the U.S. is going to double their financial commitment to addressing climate change. And so they're testing that treaty now. This year has been interesting because in past years they have tried to come to one standard of how countries would address their emissions, their carbon emissions. And that's been the reason why we haven't had an agreement internationally on climate change yet, because it keeps falling apart. Smaller nations that contribute less to climate change have wanted the larger countries to do more, and the larger countries don't want to do more. And so in this conference, what has happened is every country has brought their own plan to the table, saying, this is what we would do to address our own emissions. This is our plan of action. And some plans are really fantastic. Iceland is proposing that they go 100% geothermal energy. They're actually very close to being 100% geothermal energy. And then other countries, their plans are not so great. Example of that. At all. Shocking, Saudi Arabia, so no one's surprised there. He also asked, what does COP20 stand for? COP stands for Conference of Parties, and 21 is the 21st time this group has met to try to test climate change issues. So this has been a treaty that's 2 decades in the making, and so everybody is very on edge, hoping that this is the year that it actually works out. So.
I'm interested in how other countries. Here, I mean, I live in the United States, and we're all here talking. We're all U.S. citizens. We're just talking from the U.S. How are other developing nations able to justify, or how are they justifying their ability? I mean, or addressing their ability to want to modernize, but also having to incur the extra expense of being green about it. I mean,
well, there's a couple of conversations that are happening there. One big thing is they want the richer nations to pay for it. They want them to pay for the technology transfer. And they are justifying that argument by saying, you have gotten basically this interest-free loan from our environment for years. Now it's time for you to pay up and address the consequences of your actions. And so, and by technology transfer, they're looking for the richer nations to help fund research and development into solar energy, wind energy, those sorts of programs in developing nations, where it would be much easier to go from starting those up right away than it would be in our nation, where we have the infrastructure that's already reliant on coal and oil. The other thing that they're doing really is some are just saying, well, we'll use coal a little bit less than we planned. Not really. It's not really much of a plan. So, like I said, some of the plans here or some of the countries' plans are not really that great. They're not going to do very much. And even UN officials are admitting that the plans that the countries are submitting combined together will not stop climate change. They will not limit heating of the earth to 2 degrees Celsius. What hoping that the conference does is prove a rallying point and a point of inspiration for businesses and policymakers around the world, something that they can point to and say, hey, look, they're doing it. We need to get on the bandwagon. So if this conference is successful, it will be because of that bandwagon effect, not because these proposals are actually effective, in my opinion.
Awesome. That sounds really amazing.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how much emphasis is there on innovation, as a solution and fostering that innovation across the globe?
There's been quite a bit of focus on that, not only in the side events, but also in the conference itself. This is the first conference, the first conference of parties where business has been a really big part of the conversation. They have the conference itself has at least 50 different business sponsors, which in some cases can be kind of troubling because some of them are fossil fuel companies, and so there's been criticisms about that being greenwashing. But in some cases, they're companies that actually are very interested in innovating their supply chains, innovating their technologies. And in fact, I was just at a press conference about an hour before this talk started, where they were talking about the different technology and ICT innovations that are happening in different places around the world. There were a couple of different countries from Africa talking about the solar and battery power innovations that they're working on there. So there's quite a bit of focus on that. Whether that's reaching the ministerial level, where the treaty negotiations are happening, is one question. But at least for the delegates and the journalists who are attending here, there's been a lot of conversation in that area.
Great.
Priyanka, you got a question in the chat here asking if you are from the U.S. And yes, she's in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I grew up in Australia, but I live in the U.S. now.
How long are you in Paris for? How much longer are you in Paris for, Chrisella?
I leave tomorrow.
Cool.
I've been here about a week now.
You must be excited to come back.
I'm so excited. It's been a very long trip. Well, it is late here for me. I think I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks much, both of you, for your time and the conversations. It has been really interesting. The parts I could hear, I'm hoping the recording caught all of it. We'd love to talk with you guys more once I'm back in the States and follow up on our conversations.
Cool. Look forward to it as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for hosting, and have a safe trip back.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Thank you again,
nice
guys.
Nice meeting you, Priyanka. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. You guys. Bye.